Hey everyone, welcome to the UkeStuff channel and UkeStuff Podcast. Today I have as a guest someone whose work I've followed for quite a while and has really influenced me as a teacher. And that is Rodney Higuchi, or Uncle Rod Higuchi, who is probably best well known for the ukulele boot camp. So I'm going to bring Rodney up here into our two-screen format. For those of you that are watching, or for those of you that are listening to this video on an audio recording, we are going to share his website a little bit later today too. So again, this is another podcast that is probably best watched later. So Rodney, talk about yourself, your life, how you came to ukulele, and what you're doing with the ukulele.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, I grew up in the territory of Hawaii back in 1948, and I don't know if I was musical at all, but by the time I got to sixth grade at the Ali'iolani Elementary School, my teacher, Mrs. Wong, wanted to teach all of the class how to play the ukulele and sing because I think she wanted us to eventually go to different classrooms and provide some entertainment for the other students. She had recently returned with her husband from a trip around the world. I think it was the previous summer, and this would have been the summer of 1959. And so she had some songs from all over the world that she wanted to teach us. So at that time, because it was a requirement for the class, I asked my grandmother to help me, get an ukulele. I did not have one at the time. And so she took me to Long's Drugs at the Ala Moana Shopping Center. And I found an orange. It was very light wood, almost like balsa, um, made in Japan ukulele for $7. So we got that, and somehow to me it felt, maybe as I look back, it felt like it might have been a slightly larger than a standard soprano ukulele, but I did know the difference back then. It had wooden pegs, so tuning it was quite a challenge. So armed with that, I went to school and sat under the instruction of Mrs. Wong, and the whole class learned how to play and strum the ukulele. I remember after my first lesson, um, one of our neighbors up the street was in my class. And so I had written things down on a piece of paper, my notebook, and I went up to her and I asked her if she could help me go over some of the fingering for the chords, because I knew that she knew how to play the ukulele and I didn't. So she helped me with chords like G7 and B flat, some of the more difficult ones at that time. And I think I only saw her that once. I only refer to that. But then I guess I must have practiced. I somehow, do I remember enjoy singing? I'm not sure. I'm not sure up until that point. So I was uh, 11 or 12, or maybe, was I 13? 11. Okay, because I was born in 48 and it was 59. All right. So anyway, um, we learned throughout the year. We performed at other classes, and it was fun. And I think at that time I was beginning to listen to rock and roll on the radio. Now again, this is the older rock and roll, C, A minor, F, G7 progression over and over and over again. And so as I was learning the ukulele, I realized that I could maybe learn some of these songs so that I can replay them. But the problem is they were not recorded in C, A minor,
Mhm.
F, and G7. And so let's see. I remember getting an arch top guitar. Um, I forget, some kind of a no name, very inexpensive guitar. And I'm not sure if I was trying to learn to play the guitar before I learned the ukulele or after. But anyway, one of the instruction books I got was from an instructor named Nick Manoloff. And within the book, or as part of the book combination, there was a circular 2-page chart. And it was something like modern accompaniment or something like that. It's still available. And basically all it was it had the key, the three major chords that were in the key. Like for in the key of C, it would have been C, F, G7, and then there were little other cutouts that showed A minor and that kind of idea. So then I realized that if I could find out the chord of the song that was playing on the radio, then I could just match. If I found out that they were playing the song in the key of F, then I would turn the dial from C to F, and then I could figure out that the next three chords, F, B flat, and C7, were in the same relative position as C, F, and G7 in the key of C. So I was beginning to learn transposing, even though I didn't know what that was. And so that kind of got me through listening to songs that I wanted to replay, trying to figure out what the chord was. And all I could do was play C and then bar it and make a C sharp and go up the neck. At least I somehow I learned that every fret was I didn't think in these terms of half steps, but I knew I could look at the 12 letter or the 12 chords in an octave, and I knew it would go up like that. So if I finally figured out the song I was playing with my little finger on the 7th fret, I could figure out, well, what in relation to C, what key is that? So anyway, that's how I humored myself, and it became a hobby. And because I wanted to sing the songs, the simple rock and roll songs on the radio, and so that's what kind of got me through. After Mrs. Wong had taught us how to play Christmas songs and certain songs in other languages and whatnot. So is that all you need, or did you want more information?
Well, that's a great start. One of the questions I had for you growing up in Hawaii was, I have heard that there was a time in Hawaii where ukulele wasn't being taught in the schools. Um, and I don't know, it sounds like it certainly was when you went through. So
No,
that's
no,
kind of
it was. I think our class was the only class that was learning ukulele at the time.
okay.
So I don't remember. Like in 5th grade, we had no music training. I remember when I went to Jarrett Intermediate School. It was called Intermediate School at the time for grades 7, 8, and 9. There was band. I learned how to play the tonette. I went to band and wanted to play the saxophone. There was no choir per se, so there was music education in the intermediate grades, 7, 8, and 9, but all during my elementary school time, there was no real music except for Mrs. Wong, and it was not throughout the 6th grade. It was just her class. So
Okay.
yeah, at that time, well, let me just see. I'm almost sure I learned the tonette in intermediate school, and there was no music except for Mrs. Wong's class in elementary school. So our school really didn't have a music program outside of maybe the interests of the individual teachers.
Can you describe what a tonette is?
Yeah, a tonette is like a zucchini shaped recorder. it's about maybe 9 inches long, and do they not have tonettes anymore?
Typically we don't do too much with those. It's
Mhm.
generally just recorders now today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I kind of figured. I see recorders all over the place, but yeah, it was just a cylindrical body, but shaped like a cucumber or a zucchini, and it tapered to a like a little bell at the bottom. Um, and it was okay.
Now, did you find yourself playing just chords and singing, or were you doing riffs and breaking off into sort of like finger style sort of things as well when you were younger, and doing that rock music where you're figuring out the keys?
No, it was strictly chords and singing, and actually, there was kind of a musical awakening in my life after college, because I took that with me, and eventually I learned how to play some chords on the guitar, and I was active in church. So whenever there were we go caroling during the Christmas time and all of that, I would bring a nylon string, slightly smaller than regular size guitar, to accompany. But then when I went, I'll tell you the story. Uh, in 1966, I graduated from high school, and I was accepted to a Bible school in Chicago, the Moody Bible Institute. And I was going to bring an ukulele with me, but of course, by now the orange balsa wood ukulele was falling apart, and I wanted something nicer. So I took as much money as I had, and I went to Harry's Music Store in Kaimuki, which is where I live. And there was a conundrum. I heard about Martins, and Martins were supposed to be very good instruments. And I heard about Kamaka. Kamaka didn't have as good a reputation back then, but it was made in Hawaii, you know that. So I was looking in the showcase, and I kept trying to play between the Martin and the Kamaka soprano. And then I looked at the money that I had, and the Martin was just too expensive. So I bought the Kamaka to take with me to Chicago. And the Kamaka cost $28. And the Martin was a whopping 35. If I had known then what I know now, I'd buy up all the Martins they had. Oh my goodness. So anyway, I went to Chicago with Kamaka ukulele, and that tided me through my college years. And so I was playing hymns and Christian choruses. Um, that that portion of my life, it's kind of interesting too. You know, I did not attend the University of Hawaii. I went directly from high school to college in Chicago, and so I missed out on a lot of the folk revolution, as it were, in the uh, mid to late 60s. And that has come back to haunt me a little bit. That's kind of a dramatic way of saying it, in the sense that when we started playing music, for example, here in Seattle back in the early 2003, is when SUPA, Seattle Ukulele Players Association, was formed. And every now and then somebody would want to play a Beatles song. And because I had a relatively loud voice, I eventually became one of the song leaders. And I would have to say, can anybody else lead the song? Because I don't know it. And everybody would be aghast. You don't know the Beatles? I said, no, I don't. Then how about a Dylan song? Who's Dylan? I just didn't know the popular art. Peter, Paul, and Mary I knew, and I could sing some of their songs, but you know, weird names like Creedence Clearwater Revival, the Grateful Dead. What weird? I have no history, and even for the most part to this day, I'm the standing joke in our groups. Okay, here's another Beatles song. Better get somebody else to lead it. Uncle Rod doesn't know this one, which is still kind of true.
Now,
But
what
yeah,
was it like being a Hawaiian in Chicago and then playing the ukulele where on the mainland, well, maybe there was still the remnants of the whole McAfee thing, perhaps?
uh,
Maybe?
ac- actually, I don't know if there was any other ukulele at the school besides mine. And I liked hymns and gospel songs, so I would learn some. But for the most part, whenever we students gathered together, we sang choruses and whatnot, and so I could play it on the ukulele very easily. In fact, on Sundays I would attend a church in Gary, Indiana, so we would be on a bus, and to and from, I'd just be playing, and we'd be singing choruses on the trip and whatnot. I don't remember seeing any other ukulele on campus, and I don't remember any other kinds of ukuleles except possibly when I went to Montgomery Ward, when I first got there, I had to get a coat because it was in the fall. It was starting to get cold, so I might have seen a harmony guitar or ukulele or something. But I had my own, so I was just looking for a coat. But other than that, like McAfee, I didn't know what that name was. I didn't even think to go to, if I got any money, to go to a music store to see if they had a Martin ukulele. Somehow I got the impression there really were no ukuleles in Chicago, which is not true. But I basically stayed on campus. I love Chicago. I used to walk to the Loop all the time. I eventually learned how to read. I mean, in the sense that all through high school, I really kind of hated reading. I remember once, and this is going back to the first grade. No, was it first grade? Anyway, the teacher said you ought to get a library card and go to the library, check out some books, and after a certain while, you have to go back and return them. So I told that to my mother. So she took me to the library. I got a library card. I got about a dozen books. I took them home. I never opened them. After a certain couple of weeks or so, we get them and take them back. I, I did. I never really read. The only reading I did was what was assigned for history and English and that kind of stuff. But when I got to school, I had a class where I had to do book reports on 3 biographies, and I'll admit it. I procrastinate till the night before they were due, and I had these 3 books, and I said I gotta read them. And so that was the first time I actually read a book all the way through. In fact, when I applied to the school, one of the questions was, what 3 books are you now reading? So I went out and bought 3 books and I started reading them so I could, honestly say I started reading these 3 books. I never finished them. But anyway, so I actually read through a biography. It wasn't really big, maybe a couple hundred pages. And I was not a really good reader, but at the end of that, I thought, my goodness, you can learn a lot of things from books. It was engaging and there was a lot of information. I eventually fulfilled my requirement and wrote the 3 reviews of the biographies of these guys. I don't know what grade I got, but it really made an impact on me, and so I started really enjoying books. And of course, because I was in a Bible school, it was more nonfiction and reference oriented stuff. So I would rummage through the bookstores in Chicago looking for things that professors would recommend and say, oh, but they're out of print now. It'll be hard to find. So I was able to find some of those. Anyway, going back to Chicago, I'll give you one vignette here. A friend of mine from Hawaii was at another school in Wheaton, Illinois, Wheaton College.
Yep.
And he came by and we had a day together, which was kind of nice. He had a Martin concert ukulele that I kind of drooled over, but I was really not into makes and models of ukuleles back then. I had mine. I was okay. His sounded nice and it looked really, pretty, that dark mahogany and all that. But before he left, he played Crazy G for me. And I thought, man, I would like to learn how to play something like that. But then he had to get on the train and go back to Wheaton. So I asked him to play it again, and I tried to listen carefully. I was watching his fingers. And so when he left, I got out my kamaka, and I tried to duplicate as much as I remember him playing. And, eventually I came up with a rendition of Crazy G that reminded me of what he was playing. I had really not heard Crazy G played in the islands when I was growing up. And so I had no other reference besides what he was doing. So eventually I started adding things to it that seemed to make sense to me. And so when I finally recorded a video and posted it on YouTube a few years back, it was my rendition of Crazy G. And I do a little disclaimer and apology. And I tell this story like this is what I think I remember hearing when this friend of mine played Crazy G for me. So I try to teach it to my class because I didn't tab it out, but I created a, a like a song sheet for it because I figured um, I'm getting into my teaching now. When I teach, I wanted to teach people chording in at least 5 keys. You know, the C, F, G, A, and D, because I think if they know the basic chords that go in each of those keys, they can go to any song circle, and as long as the songs are written in one of those keys, they can feel comfortable playing along. And my objective was to help my students become confident players in a song circle. Okay, so besides teaching the chords in those 5 keys, which make up the ukulele boot camp, I figured they need to learn how to play a song that's like a chord melody, like Crazy G, because inevitably, when people see them with an ukulele, they're going to say, "Oh, you play an ukulele? Can you play a song for us?"
Mhm.
And you know, most people are not going to break into song, and even if it's Happy Birthday, they're going to be too self-conscious and all. So I said, you know, I thought if I can teach them the rudiments of my rendition of Crazy G, then they'll have something in their back pocket and they can play the song. And then I tell them, if anybody says, "Can you play something else?" You just say no. That's all I know. So I wanted them to learn the chords in 5 keys. I wanted them to learn Crazy G. And I also kind of tabbed out Green Sleeves. What child is this? And so I wanted them to learn Crazy G as a strumming chord melody. What child is this? Or Green Sleeves as a finger picking melody. And then I figured, you know, if they will learn how to do the triple strum, then that will really add to their enjoyment, I think, of playing the ukulele. So my objective again is to help them become confident members of a song circle with the skills of being able to identify and play songs in 5 keys, play Crazy G, Green Sleeves, and learn the triple strum so they can just spice up their own strumming of songs. So that's kind of what I try to do within 5 to 8 weeks, depending on how much time I have for my classes. And of course, in the process, we go through, you know, 5 or 6 songs in each of the keys, in the key of C, F, G, A, or D. And then if I happen to teach during the fall, I print out the holiday songbook that, you know, I've been using for years, and you know, going through that so that they have something for the holiday season.
So I wanna back up 1 second before we go and take a look at some of your resources. So you're in Moody. What
Yes,
was your major going to be at Moody?
I had a pastoral major with Greek emphasis.
Okay. So you were learning Koine Greek.
Yes.
Wow. Not an easy language by any means. And then, so what was the next part of your life then after you graduate from Moody? Where do you go, and at what point do you start teaching? When did you start teaching?
Okay. So Crazy G that I kind of learned or played around with from my friend who was from Hawaii, who was in Illinois also. That kind of helped me see that I could do something with the ukulele that was more than just strumming. Although Crazy G was a strumming melody, and so I started to work on Green Sleeves. You know, what child is this? And so I kind of learned a few chords up the neck because obviously you can't just play it on the first position song chording for the most part. But then after I graduated in '69, I had an opportunity to go with a team to Japan for the summer, and we, you know, we kind of taught English at the English speaking societies and whatnot. And then I returned home to Hawaii, thinking that I was gonna. Moody was not an. I couldn't get a degree from Moody at the time. It was 3 years, '66 to '69, and I was going to try to complete my degree, my bachelor's degree at the University of Hawaii. So I enrolled at the University of Hawaii, and it was at that time two things happened. Number one, an ukulele virtuoso, I forget their name. I don't think he became famous or anything, but he was going to be featured with the Honolulu Symphony Orchestra, and he was playing Yellow Bird, and I thought, oh my goodness, how neat. So that was kind of my introduction to the idea of the ukulele as a kind of virtuoso instrument. Um, and I think his rendition was more picking than chord melody or strumming and all that. So I thought, my goodness, that's pretty neat. I was only at the university for 1 year, 69, 70. So the first thing was my eyes and ears were open to the idea that the ukulele could be a virtuoso instrument. And then I started listening to Otasan on the radio and other ukulele virtuosos. And so I started researching around, and I would go and watch Otasan at various clubs and whatnot. But he had at that time, he had a marimba or xylophone player, I think a bass player. I'm not sure if he had a guitar or a drummer, but he was accompanied by other musicians. But I still liked his style, because his was more or less pure picking, right? It was really neat, and I bought his albums when they came out and all of this. But then I started. I think there was another ukulele musician, Eddie Bush, who actually appeared on the Tonight Show, and he played like "Holiday for Strings" or something like that. And so that was pretty neat. I'm not sure if I went to see him or not. I also began to appreciate Hawaiian music, and
Mhm.
so I would go to places where certain bands were playing so that I could hear them live and in person, as it were. So there was a lot of music for me during the year of 69, 70, the school year of 69, 70. So that was one of the things that happened. The second thing is I met my future wife, and so we started dating, and my uncle was a fine arts major and teacher at the University of Hawaii. And so I asked him, "Do you know?" Because he would go around to bars and whatnot, and I was never interested in that. And I asked him, "Do you know any? When you go around to these nightclubs and bars, do you hear good ukulele players?" And he said, "Well, the head of the art department at the University of Hawaii, his name is Gordon Mark, and he plays at the Captain's Galley in Waikiki. You ought to listen to him." And of course, I was not very broad-minded. As soon as I heard, "What? He's the chairman of the art department?" I don't think so. And I wouldn't go. And so for the longest time, I was doing my research, listening to different ukulele players, and they were pretty much all accompanied by other musicians. And I thought, I wanna. And the first guy I heard was the guys that was backed up by the symphony orchestra, And I was thinking there must be a way to play the ukulele without having to have other musicians, because I knew I was going to be on my own, and I didn't want to have to look for a xylophone player or a bass player or a guitar player or something. And finally, about a week or two before I was going to leave Hawaii to go to Portland to attend seminary in Portland, Western Conservative Baptist Seminary, my uncle said, "You really ought to go listen to Gordon Mark at the Captain's Galley. I think you'll like it." So finally, just prior to that, my mom had invited me to a year-end dinner. She worked for the army, for the government, and all of this. And then they had a raffle, and she had won. At that time, cassette recorders were a new thing, and she had won a cassette recorder, which was kind of neat. So when I finally decided I would go to listen to Gordon Mark at the Captain's Galley, I had a table way in the back. I asked them, "Do you serve Coke?" Yeah, they do. Okay, so I didn't feel badly. But once he started playing, I thought, "Oh my goodness, that's what I want to do." Have you heard Gordon Mark play?
I have not.
Oh, you ought to check him out on YouTube. And anyway, wonderful, wonderful. And he had a fantastic repertoire of all kinds of songs. He had a Martin tenor, and a Kamaka baritone. So he would alternate between those two. But he'd play Warsaw Concerto, he'd play Beethoven's Fifth, as well as other pop. By the time I get to Phoenix and some of these others, it was fantastic, and it was all by himself. He was there. In fact, later on, I had heard that he was interviewed for the newspaper, and the interviewer, halfway through, he said, "How come you're not giving the other guy any credit?" He said, "What other guy? The guy that's supporting you while you're doing your." He says, "There is no other guy." So I mean, it was fantastic, and you got to listen to him. I think you'll really enjoy it.
I will
So
check it out.
yeah, after the performance, and it's just Gordon, M-A-R-K, Mark. After the performance, I went up to him and I said, I'm going to be leaving for Seattle in a couple of days. Can I bring a tape recorder and record your performance? He said, "Yeah, sure, sure." So then I invited my girlfriend at that time, and we got new batteries for the cassette recorder and a cassette tape, 90-minute cassette tape. And I got a little closer this time at a table, and we ordered our round of Cokes and whatnot. And I mean, I recorded it to the point where the batteries were dying, and so the end of the tape was just kind of not very good. But my eyes were just glued to his fingers, like, how is he getting that sound? And so at the end of that performance, just before we were going to leave, I thanked him and all that, and I said, "I'm going to go to Portland, Oregon tomorrow. What can you show me that can help me, develop what you're doing, your skill?" And he showed me two fingers. And in fact, if you look up Gordon Mark on YouTube and something like 2-minute lesson, if you find Gordon Mark with something like 2 minutes and maybe 30 something seconds, you ought to listen to that one first. And he goes over his two finger thing. He uses his thumb to play down on the fourth and third strings, and his index finger to play up on the first and second strings. And so he said, you start on the low, and then the next one, and then you go out, and then you come back to the low.
So to describe this, what Rodney's doing is he's playing the third string with his thumb,
Third string,
the second finger with his index finger, then he's playing the fourth string with his thumb, and the first string with his index finger again.
Right. And then I go back to the fourth string and then the second string. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay.
And so in the course of about 2 minutes, he taught me that, and he said, "That's it. You just keep practicing that." And so that's what I did. I went to seminary in the fall, and that year, besides my studies, I was just playing the cassette tape over and over again, trying to remember what I remember his chord hand was doing, and then working on that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm not fluent in that at all, but at least I have a base of understanding, and it was just, it was really wonderful. So I believe it was that either that holiday season or possibly the following summer, I was able to go back to Hawaii. And this time I got a Sony, a big reel-to-reel tape recorder. And I called him and said, "Is it possible for me to come by after school sometime and record you?" I don't know where that cassette tape is, and I don't know where that reel-to-reel tape is, but those are treasures. If I ever find them, I'm not even sure I can play them now. I mean, I don't have a cassette recorder or a reel-to-reel. So it was just a wonderful thing. I'm not sure if Gordon is still alive. The past summers prior to this last summer and maybe a summer before, I found out he was teaching at a friend's place. And so I gave him a call and asked him if I could just join the class. I was only going to be there for That was before I retired, so I could only go there for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, 3 or 4 lessons. And he said, "Yeah, sure, just drop by." He has a very unique way of transcribing what he does. It's just a paper full of tiny diagrams, and the diagrams show obviously the formation, the placement of the fingers, and then by virtue of certain little marks and dots, he shows the picking pattern that he uses from diagram to diagram or from chord to chord for a particular song. And it can be, relatively simple or very, very complex. And just like with some tab, it doesn't necessarily show you the rhythm, the timing. So you kind of have to know how he plays it in order to read the page. From what I remember, he was fairly picky in terms of allowing people to come and learn from him, because if you didn't know how to read his transcribed information, then it would stop you right there, and then he would have to go over it again, and he didn't want to. And he's like a if he's still alive, he should either be in his late 80s or early 90s. Yeah, and not a whole lot of patience. Okay.
Well, I will definitely. I mean, I took a note here to make sure that I look him up, and I'll try to make sure that some of those things are linked in the YouTube or in the show notes.
Great.
I
Yeah, that
wanted to
two
follow
minute.
up.
Yeah,
Well,
that
go ahead.
short 2 minute lesson would be interesting. And
Okay.
then any song that you find inspiring or encouraging to share with others. I hope he's still alive, but I haven't seen him or made contact with him over the last couple 3 years.
Especially with COVID, you
Oh
know.
yeah.
I had a couple more follow-up questions. Just one really quick, which is being Hawaiian in your background. How did Hawaiians react to Tiny Tim? Being that he was popular when
Hmm.
you were in the college years,
Hmm.
how did Hawaiians react to that?
I got the impression that he was seen more as a joke. I didn't realize he was really a good musician
Yeah, he
and whatnot.
was.
And I didn't realize that, I guess, possibly Tiptoe Through the Tulips might have been sung falsetto initially, and so he wasn't necessarily trying to make fun of the song or anything like that. So his rendition might actually be fairly authentic, but because Hawaiians, we're used to hearing people sing falsetto, but Hawaiian songs, not necessarily popular songs. And I remember seeing him. I forget what program it was. I don't know if it was Ed Sullivan or like the Tonight Show
Laugh-In,
or
probably. Yeah.
yeah. And so I remember seeing, and of course, I guess he played left-handed or something, so that looked a little odd. I think I had learned tiptoe through the tulips, and not being able to sing falsetto, I just sang it, in my regular voice, vocal range and whatnot. And I had only heard it sung like that. So when I witnessed his presentation, I thought, wow, that's very unique, and it was kind of off-putting because it broke my concentration. I was focused on his voice, and so I didn't really enjoy the presentation as maybe I should have. But I think I got the impression that okay, so that's the one guy, that's his song, and I really haven't heard him perform any other music. So that's the only song I know done by Tiny Tim. And of course, whenever we would get together in our song circles, and I would select Tiptoe Through the Tulips because I like it. Some people would break out in falsetto, and people would laugh, or they would say, "Oh no, not that one," and I'm thinking it's a good song, no, don't worry about it. But I got the impression that people kind of discounted him as a performer, but obviously he's very well known.
Well, and the whole reason I ask is because, like, in context of being 2021 now, right?
Mm.
Um, we look at some things and ask about cultural appropriateness and some
Oh.
other things. And again, it was a different time, for
Mhm.
good or for bad. Different values in society, different things were accepted. But I've always kind of wondered if Hawaiians would have seen their instruments being used sort of for that joke. Not to say that he was
Mm,
a joke performer,
right.
or that, but he had a shtick, right? I mean,
Yes.
he had a comedy routine, that he was a comedian. That's what he
Mm.
did. And I always wondered if Hawaiians would watch that and be offended that their instrument was used as a punchline and as part of the joke. I just was curious. So that's what I wanted to ask you, is your background.
Uh, there may have been some serious, ukulele musicians that might have been truly offended, but again, that's the only song I associate with Tiny Tim, and that's the only song I've ever heard him perform. So I don't know any of his other work, and at that time, and even now, I'm not a spokesman for the instrument, and so that's just one example of somebody using the ukulele. I mean, so I'm not negative against him. I don't have any agenda that I'm trying to protect. It's just, if people like it, fine. If people don't like it, fine. It's just another example of somebody playing the ukulele.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's the first one. The other thing I wanted to follow up on is you go to Portland, and then at some point you get married.
Yes.
And then what's that next part of the journey? And then when do you start having your first students?
Oh my goodness, the students didn't come till decades later because I was just playing it for myself. I would hear songs, I would arrange it for my own use. While I was at a seminary, one of my professors was going to have a luau, and my wife does know how to do the hula. At least she took a class at the university, and so this professor invited me to and my wife to come and provide some entertainment, singing, and then maybe do a hula or something. And so we did that, and that was the only time we did that. For the most part, outside of providing some strumming background for groups that wanted to do choruses and whatnot, and maybe during the holiday time for caroling, it was more just a private hobby of mine. I wasn't performing. I was just helping out, as it were. If somebody, wanted, I wasn't carrying my ukulele all over the place, and I also was not really adding to the ukuleles that I had. Although I did see in a pawn shop one of Roy Smeck's seal ukulele, where the sound holes were look like seals
Yep,
facing
the
each
Vita
other.
Uke.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And so I think they wanted like $11 for it or something, and I mean that's when gas was 25 cents a gallon. So I thought that was a little bit too much, and so I declined. And then my wife said, if you really want it, I mean, I've never seen one like that. What's the chances you're going to find another one? So I said, okay. I went back, and I guess based on the interest that I had showed on it, the price went up to 14,
Oh no.
which is okay. I went ahead and got it. And unlike and sort of like many of the ukuleles I have acquired over the years, I don't know where it is. It must be somewhere, but it wasn't one that I played a lot. So I had a Kamaka. Oh, by the way, when I was in Hawaii with Gordon Mark, prior to my returning to Hawaii, I did go to. It was probably a famous music store in Chicago. I don't remember the name, but there was a Martin tenor ukulele for $145 with a nice hard case, and I figured, I'm going to graduate. I'm going to treat myself to something nice. And so I got it. And I did find the tenor a little bit large for me. I have short, pudgy fingers, and stretching it out. I have to say, got to take it with a grain of salt, because the rest of the story is this: I ended up buying it. I obviously took it back with me to Hawaii, and somehow Gordon Mark found out that I had this Martin tenor, And I was enamored with his Martin tenor and Kamaka baritone. And so he said he had a student at the time. He said, if you're willing to trade me your Martin tenor, I will get you a Kamaka tenor and a Kamaka baritone in exchange. So I thought, hey, I get two. Sure, fine. I wasn't wedded to Martin, although I did like Martin at the time. So I did the trade, and so I got a Kamaka tenor and a Kamaka baritone. I think a little later I figured out, when I finally found out what seconds were. I think he got ones that Kamaka was just happy to let go. But that's okay. That's okay. So I say that because even though I found the tenor in Chicago a little bit stretchy to play for my fingers, I ended up with a Kamaka tenor and a Kamaka baritone, which I played, for many years after that. So when would that have been? Anyway, so I had that, and I would play for our family reunions when we got together between terms in Chicago. I would go to camps and as a counselor, and I'd play there for the campers and whatnot. And I did that for a couple of summers. I played in Japan because we were teaching English, so we taught some English choruses and songs. So then I went to seminary. Again, it was more of a private hobby. There were really no Hawaiian groups or any other ukulele groups that I didn't even know that they existed, at the time. And then in 76, I graduated in 74. I squeezed 3 years into four. And then our daughter was born in 75. And then we moved up to Seattle in 1976, the first year of the Seahawk franchise. I had been pastoring a church, interim pastoring a church in Portland for a couple of years. And then I was called to a church up in Seattle and was there from 76 to about 81. And then I got into Christian book selling, not as an owner, but as an employee and a manager, and did that for 14, 17 years or something like that. And then my wife, after our boys were born, and we have two sons, after the youngest one started attending preschool, she decided, since she was a teacher, she decided to go back into teaching. So she, became an employee of the Seattle School District while I was managing bookstores. And eventually, they were going to close down an operation for the bookstore, so they didn't need an extra manager. So I started looking at Seattle Public Schools, but I didn't want to teach. My wife wanted me to go into teaching, but I saw all the work she had to do in preparation and whatnot, and I saw that the other option was just to become a secretary. So I went for the assistant secretary position and became a sub, going around the district. And eventually, my wife's elementary school was losing their head secretary because she was moving to another position in another part of the city. And so, so they hired me as an interim, secretary. And so I did that. And as they were offering that position to full-time replacements, the middle school from that provided the secretary now had an opening for an assistant secretary position. And very graciously, the two principals got together and said, well, let's just swap. We'll send Mr. Higuchi to your school and, bring Katie over to Gatewood. And so that was very nice of them to do that. And then I went to Denny International Middle School as a sub, short-term sub. And eventually the position became a permanent position. And so the head secretary said, Rod, you ought to apply for that. I'll put in a good word for you and all this. So the deck was stacked in my favor. So I became the assistant secretary at Denny, which I did for 12 to 14 years, and then recently retired in April of 2020. But again, it was, it was still like more of a hobby. Except in 2000, and can I break into this part of the story now?
Yeah, let's
In
actually,
two,
what we should do is
yeah,
this. I think what I'm going to do is let's end temporarily. We're not going to end the call or anything,
sure,
but let's just for the sake of the video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit stop here, and then we can start with part two,
okay,
getting into the actual teaching.
yeah,
So while I wrap up this part, even though we're not wrapping anything up in person
right,
right now, I just want to summarize kind of what I heard with your journey. So starting in Hawaii, picking up ukulele in elementary school with one particular teacher, finding yourself going to seminary, playing it through seminary, coming back to Hawaii, being um, being really inspired not only by Herb Oda-san, but also as Gordon Mark.
yes,
All right,
hmm,
finding your wife, still dating while you came back to finish your degree in Hawaii, then going to Portland Seminary where you get married, you continue to play, and then you find yourself as a Christian bookseller, and then later as a school, we call them administrative assistants these
hmm,
days,
hmm, yeah,
because again, terminology has changed, but all this way through, music continues as part of your life.
yes.
Um, Before we close this particular video down, and we're not going to close it down, we'll keep going. But did your sons play too? Did anybody else
Actually,
start playing in
no,
your
no,
family?
nobody really did. My wife is a very good singer, and she and her sisters, two sisters, made up a trio, and they would sing at church, all the time together in very close harmony. But even she doesn't sing much now. And during the time that she's been teaching, she recently retired in August of 2020. But I kept saying, if you want me to teach you how to play the ukulele, you can sing songs for your. She was a first grade kindergarten teacher, but she never took me up on it, and I expressed the same willingness to teach my children, and no, no, they had their own thing going, and so I'm the only ukulele player in the family. I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty sure my kids can sing, although they don't spontaneously sing. And I know my wife can sing, but again, she doesn't really sing with me. And these are some old songs that her dad used to sing to the girls and whatnot. But yeah, they have other interests. So unfortunately, no, all the ukuleles are mine. All the music is mine.
That's
We
all
just
good.
let dad do his thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I have my youngest plays, and I mean he's only 9, so and we'll see if that continues to foster, which is a lot of fun. All right, so Rodney, let's wrap up this video here, and I want to thank you for joining me, and to everybody that's listening or watching this, we will follow up in another week or two with another edition of the podcast with talking about Rodney's actual work now in terms of what he does with ukulele. So thanks for joining me. And as usual, I hope you're having a great day. And we'll be back soon with some more Uke stuff for you.